Shamrock was incredibly technical, and that he actually was a natural, really. I mean, of course, he's a natural athlete being in the UFC, but seeing him come into WWF and just pick up everything so fast, it's rare that you kind of see that, doing moves that he was doing and everything. And he could even do stuff like Hurricanranas and all of that. And, that's very specific to wrestling.
Sure. Yeah. No, it was, and it was quite an intense match. I mean, when you think of what was going on here, you'll notice, Matt, in that match that Vader ended up with a bloody nose as well during the match. So Meltzer writes after this, Vader was both the best and worst opponent for his first encounter. The best because of his own famous series of matches with Takeda, the experience work to shoot style that Vader had back in Japan. So it definitely made a lot of sense for a guy like Vader to do this. But I think overall everybody kind of is happy at this point with Shamrock. Fans seem like they're into him. I mean, when you watch that match, it looks like that they're really kind of getting Shamrock over. He looks like he's the big deal here. Like WWF are doing quite a lot to get behind him in all this. So yeah, I think that they definitely designed this to get Shamrock over in the first attempt, and it's at a good stage at this point, Matt, as far as his debut match for me, for sure. Like there's nothing kind of at all too bad here. Okay, fun fact here, Matt. When the ring announcer Howard Finkel announced that the next match would be the No Holds Barred match, the response from nearly the full house of 9,000 at the Pro Wrestling Gate of the fans, which, by the way, is reported as the largest wrestling crowd ever in that city. By the way, which is quite something. It's reported that straight after the WWF were originally going to cut to a UFC ad. It never happened. However, they do talk about it at certain parts during the pay-per-view. But when Shamrock came down the aisle, he got a good response from the crowd, so they didn't want to kind of take it out of that at that time. The crowd didn't take to him as a main event superstar, Meltzer feels, but they did see him as a star. UFC advert used in the match in the end because they really wanted everybody on the TV screens to see the reaction he was getting. Are you surprised, Matt, that WWF did the deal with UFC to have to run UFC adverts during a pay-per-view?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised, but I guess at the time they didn't really see them as that big of a threat. And maybe, at that time, a more mutual, beneficial, kind of relationship would help them both.
Sure.
But yeah, I am kind of surprised. WWE seemed to be, very self-reliant a lot of the time. And, to go to an outside source or an outside sort of sports thing that like the UFC themselves is kind of out of character for them, I guess.
When you watch that back on the network, so I can't remember, did they leave that in?
I didn't actually see that. Actually,
I was just wondering.
I'm not sure whether
I was just curious.
Or not, but I just watched the match.
Yeah,
I don't know whether they edited it shortly after.
Yeah, I was just curious whether they would leave that in on the network. Like so much is tampered with on that stuff. Okay, so now we move on to May 26th, and it's reported here, Matt, that Vader, the injury he'd suffered was actually legit. His legs were shot from all the leg kicks to the point he couldn't even walk until the Friday after, and he needed fluid drained from his knee. Not to mention catching a knee to the nose, which broke the nose in 4 places. Somewhat of a disastrous month for poor old Vader, isn't it? Getting locked up for 10 old days, coming back from Kuwait, and then comes back to a match with Shamrock, and then this happens. Not the best. Vader's injuries, besides a beaten up thigh and knee and broken nose in 4 places, include a broken septum as well in the nose. It's the nose as opposed to the leg problems that have had him out of action, because he couldn't breathe well through the nose when he was sleeping, and will likely now need surgery. So he is now scheduled to be out for some time. So it, unfortunately, it kind of ends that kind of program that they had planned. But just before that, they both did do a Madison Square Garden. And by the way, when I mention MSG back here, it's worth pointing out that Madison Square Garden was like still the place for WWF for house shows. Like even here, it was WWF's home, and whenever WWF done house shows, it got in some crazy money. So to give you guys just a little bit of insight of what used to go down, this particular Madison Square Garden show drew 10,702 people that paid, around 15,000 in the building that night, and that grosses in approximately $233,000 million. Sorry, 200, not million. That would be something, wouldn't it, Matt, if they got that? Christ, $233,000. Plus another $108,000 in merchandise sales. That's a hell of a lot. That's not too bad, but this is '97. This is not the best time, but it's interesting to look at the figures, because as we go along the timelines, I'll mention it now and then to see how business is going. But this is 1997. This is not like the biggest upturn for WWF, but Madison Square Garden in general, New York, it always got its kind of high levels of money for WWF. It always drew well. With Vader injured that night, they planned Undertaker and Shamrock versus Vader and Mankind match, but that turned into Undertaker just having a match against Mankind and them having a lumberjack style match around it. Shamrock was also pulled from the match itself, and instead just done a run-in that night, and was one of the lumberjacks. So he wasn't kind of involved in that one. But it would have been interesting to see where they were going, because at the time the Undertaker was the WWF champion, Matt. And again, if you were going to tag him with Shamrock, that's kind of telling me that WWF has positioned him quite high up the card, shall we say, if they're running that on a house show, because. For those of you that might not know, house shows in general, they're always kind of an insight into the future. WWE tests a lot of things in those live shows. It's reported a week later Ken Shamrock suffered food poisoning whilst in Calgary training under Bret Hart at the time and Leo Burke, and was pulled from several house shows. Shamrock will be opening the Lions Den Gym in California that same week, and everything's going well apart from the food poisoning. So he's not really getting an awful lot of match time here. When he finally does come back, this is around June time, very early June, and he is a referee in a match between Farouk and Ahmed Johnson on a house show. He does that about 3 times. They're running a circuit around at the same time on house shows on the weekend. Note to self here, at the time WWF was negotiating with Dan the Beast Severn about working with Ken Shamrock. It's worth probably talking about Dan Severn, because I don't know any other time that we'll speak about Severn. And it kind of makes sense with the whole UFC stuff going on with Shamrock that we would talk about Dan Severn slightly on Shamrock's timeline, because I don't really think we'd be talking about him any other time. So June 16th, Matt, 1997 is WWF King of the Ring. Shamrock is not used here because of literally they just the programs that they had ready for him had kind of got cancelled, and then again with his food poisoning thing, that kind of got messed around. So a little bit of a disruptive time, Matt, not to see Shamrock being used at the 1997 King of the Ring, and it seems like a bit of a disappointment that they didn't have him in that, especially when Shamrock coming from that UFC background, that tournament kind of style. You would have thought they would have made him kind of a big deal in that. Certainly as a King of the Ring participant. So I was slightly disappointed in that. And, I've kind of not given it a thought before. I just thought, maybe there was something else to it. Were you surprised that they didn't use him at all on King of the Ring?
Yeah, I am really quite surprised. I mean, especially when you consider, like, the King of the Ring run he has, after that, and, he's able to go, like, pretty much all the way. It kind of makes me wonder, like, was that always the plan? Did something come up last minute that would make them change their minds? Or did they consider when they actually were signing Shamrock, like, did they have the King of the Ring tournament in mind that he would do that, and they just decided that this one wasn't the right time? And all these kind of things like do come up as big questions over those kind of situations.
Sure. The night after King of the Ring on Raw, Mankind beats Pillman via DQ, and the Hart Foundation do a run-in. Austin and Shamrock did a run-in to save Mankind at the time and cleared the ring, but Austin, staying true to his then character, still hits a stunner on Shamrock just after they clear the ring. So at this point, they're kind of using Shamrock in the hole, and I don't know if you remember this, but this is leading up to the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view where they had like that big 5-on-5 match. It's the one where all the kind of Hart family come in at the end. So Shamrock's kind of being put into the big kind of like I guess then faction of just all these guys that are going to go up against the Hart Foundation, including Brian Pillman at the time in this big match, and that's the kind of feud that he's in at that time. Raw from the 23rd, 1997. Goldust is just had a match with Jim Neidhart, and again they kind of do the similar kind of thing that happened last time. Shamrock does the whole running. There's a big kind of schmaltz in the ring, and Shamrock's then trying to fend off everyone again with Mankind, Austin. The Legion of Doom are even involved in this one. So at this point, WWF, to me, Matt, they look like they're kind of being very careful with Shamrock still, like they're not having him in many matches. And he's still, I guess, in WWF terms, he's still very green. He's still like not done an awful lot. In WWF, and we're up to June here. Are you surprised when you kind of think of Ken Shamrock that it took that long still at this point, Matt, for him to get kind of going in an active sense?
Yeah, I mean, it does really, because it was all there for him. His in the ring skills are solid, and I think he was actually showing himself to be a good wrestler, and I think he had quite a bit of support. So it does kind of make me wonder why he wasn't getting the traction in the matches that he should have been getting at the time. I mean, I know there was like you just explained, there was a series of unfortunate events like about him, like forcing him to miss a couple of like opportunities. But I think it's just normal at that kind of time that it would happen. But I'm really surprised that he didn't get the matches he deserved.
Yeah. This is quite a big one here, is that he done a house show on the 20th of June in Philadelphia, and he would headline the house show, teaming up with the then WWF champion Undertaker. And this is probably what they tried to do a little while ago, but unfortunately Shamrock got Vader would be injured for that, and they just ended up taking Shamrock out of it. But they basically did an Undertaker and Ken Shamrock up against Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith, and that headline, apparently that was one of the best matches of the night, of a tag match. That's an interesting concept that he was, he's been put that far up the card, Matt. All right, it's a tag team match, but it's still headlining, and there's a hell of a lot of guys he's kind of gone in front of there to get that.